समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Does the name Khawaja Asif ring a bell? Khawaja Asif is the Pakistani Defence Minister, often makes news for the wrong kind of reasons. From his country's point of view, he's the one who for example, said in a TV interview that the evidence, when he was asked for evidence of Indian planes that Pakistan claimed to have shot down, he said evidence is lying all over social media. That same great character. He also said just before Operation Sindoor began and there was tension that fighting could start any moment, India could carry out some operations any moment, he recorded a video of himself sort of reclining and saying, when you want to shoot, don't talk. That's the line from The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. The same character. He's an interesting politician. He's an interesting politician because he is actually quite articulate, he's educated, he's well read, and also he knows the parliamentary craft. So Pakistani parliament functions a lot. It may not matter for very much, but it functions a lot. Speaking in Pakistani parliament, he said some really interesting things, some very really interesting and significant things, also candid and honest. This kind of candor we haven't seen a Pakistani politician in power. We've seen this kind of candor from Pakistani politicians out of power when they are in exile, not when they are in power. Of course, you could argue back with me and say Defence Minister of Pakistan doesn't mean he has any power, because I don't think Minister of Defence in Pakistan ever has any control over the armed forces. But that besides, he's the Minister of Defence and he's speaking in Pakistani parliament. What's he saying? He's reflecting on why there is so much terrorism in Pakistan still. He's not worrying about terrorism in India. He's at this point exercised about terrorism in Pakistan, because this is the debate over last Friday's human bombing at a Shia mosque in Northwest Frontier Province, what used to be Northwest Frontier Province and is now called KPK, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. In that, immediately 31 people were killed, many more were grievously injured. Chances are that a lot more succumbed ultimately. What's he saying there? What's his lament? We have to listen to his lament and I will explain it to you. And after that, I will inflict on you something that I had written in 2011. In fact, November 21, 2011. And that is something where I said, listen. A lot of people are thinking that India should go and do stuff in Afghanistan and fight some kind of a proxy war against Pakistan from Afghanistan. I had then said, leave AF to Pak, because the Americans like to say the AF-Pak region. I had then foreseen that at one point will go away. It took them a few years longer. It took Joe Biden to get them out of there. But I had said they will go away. And when that happens, leave AF to Pak. Let the Pakistanis deal with Afghanistan, because it will be such a pain for them. And that's precisely what's happened. I'll read some of that out to you. However, let me first tell you what is it that Khawaja Asif is saying. He's saying that post-1991, he's talking about both alliances that Pakistan made with the Americans in Afghanistan. One in the first jihad, that is following the Soviet invasion in 1979, and second after 9/11. He's complaining about both, and he says in both we gained very little, and as a result, Pakistan was left this fundamentalism, these fundamentalist terrorist organizations who raise questions about Pakistan's sovereignty, etc. I'm paraphrasing it, and then I'm also getting into what he's saying precisely. He said that post-1991, we aligned with the Americans in their war in Afghanistan. I think he's got his time frames a little bit wrong here and there, but happens when you talk rhetoric in parliament, not from a piece of paper or not from a teleprompter. this alliance, the second alliance that he's talking about, actually came towards the end of 2001. That is after 9/11. That was September 11, 2001. However, he says, post 1991, we made an alliance with the Americans in their war in Afghanistan, which was a historic error. Then he also goes on to say that in the period of 2001 to now, or to whenever the American aid stopped, Pakistan was a recipient of $33 billion. Now, I don't know where he's counting. $33 billion of American aid. From what I've read in the American sources, they say that $20 billion between 2001 and 11, $20 billion, it's a lot of money for a country like Pakistan. $20 billion had gone straight to Pakistan. I'm sure other money had gone here and there, and more rent was paid afterwards. So he's calculating that $33 billion have come to Pakistan, yet it has done no good to Pakistan. It has left Pakistan a wreck with terrorist organizations running amok and carrying out attacks of the kind that Pakistan saw last Friday. He quotes from a speech of Hillary Clinton. Again, he's mixed up his periods. He says in a landmark speech of Hillary Clinton at the UN, she described how they left Pakistan like a piece of toilet paper. First of all, Hillary Clinton never used that expression, toilet paper. She once used that other famous expression, or what many in Pakistan would find infamous. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, made that famous statement, or infamous if you're a Pakistani partisan, when she schooled them or lectured them by saying that you can't raise snakes in your backyard, not the exact quote, you can't raise snakes in your backyard, hoping that they will only bite your neighbors. Eventually, they'll come back and bite those who raised them. That is what she said. She didn't say that we threw away Pakistan, we junked Pakistan like toilet paper. He again mixes his periods again. He, however, uses it as his own flourish as well. He says, हमको टिश्यू पेपर की तरह फेंक दिया. Then he says, टिश्यू पेपर भी नहीं, टॉयलेट पेपर की तरह यूज करके फेंक दिया. So he uses tissue paper and toilet paper. At some point, however, he puts this in Hillary Clinton's mouth, which is not wrong because he's also got his time periods wrong. He says, however, and I'm quoting from him now, but we did not learn our lessons. We started celebrating when Bill Clinton visited us for just 2 hours. That was in 2000. That was after the war in Kargil when Clinton came to India. On the way back, he made a short stopover in Pakistan where he spoke to Pakistani people on camera. He did not make a physical visit into the capital. He only did this from the airport. That was the 2-hour visit he's talking about. That is when Hillary Clinton was the first lady. She was not Secretary of State. That happened much, much later under Obama administration. However, the important thing is what Khawaja Asif is saying. He says Pakistan was treated worse than a piece of toilet paper and was used for a purpose and thrown away. And then he said this was our most expensive error. He calls it, and I quote, an expensive gamble which sowed the seeds of instability and radicalization, still plaguing the country. Then he says in 1980s, the jihad that was carried out in 1980 against the Soviets in Afghanistan, this was no religious duty. For 2 generations of Pakistanis have been made to believe that this was a jihad, that all Muslims had to fight. He says this was no religious duty. People were rallied, and I'm quoting from him, people were rallied to battle in the name of jihad, but the term was misapplied and detrimental. It was detrimental to Pakistan. He says in the name of this jihad, the first Afghan jihad against the Soviets, the education system was overhauled to embed ideological changes because you had to jihadize your education system to convince your people that this was a holy national Islamic religious duty. And that contamination of the textbooks still continues. Stay with me because he elaborates it further. He says this was not about jihad, this was not religious duty. This war in Afghanistan, the first jihad, was about America's geopolitical interests. It was not a religious calling, it was American geopolitical interests in which we got involved. And this planted in Pakistan long-term instability and radicalization. Then again, he blames General Musharraf for striking one more alliance with the Americans after 9/11. Remember, the Americans had then hailed Musharraf as Pakistan's stalwart ally. Since 2002, he goes on to say, I had said this earlier, $33 billion have come in from the Americans in aid. In the process, questions have risen and groups have risen questioning how sovereign is Pakistan, questioning compromises over Pakistan's sovereignty, and also raising other trickier questions that if we are fighting Islamic battles, if we are fighting these jihads, then why not have Sharia law in Pakistan? In the process, a group like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan has come in, because what does Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan want? They don't want to break up Pakistan. They just want to enforce the Sharia law in all of Pakistan. Then he says further, and I quote, we can never make up for these losses, as these were irreversible blunders and turning Pakistan into a chessboard for their squabbles. Now, Zalmay Khalilzad, not my favorite person. If you've been following my writings and cut the clutter, I've been very critical of him. Zalmay Khalilzad is of the Afghan origin, born in Afghanistan, but American for a long time, an American diplomat, an American negotiator. He was heading the American negotiating team with the Taliban at Doha. He has tweeted now, usually he's been seen as an apologist for the Taliban and also for Pakistan, but you know what? Now the Taliban and the Pakistanis have broken apart. They are fighting. Zalmay has a little bit of the seller's remorse because he sold this deal as a good thing to both the Americans and the Pakistanis, and he would have thought that Taliban are the biggest beneficiaries from this, so they'll be grateful to him. But Taliban have also become a force in their own right, so he's got a little bit of a seller's remorse on this. So what's he saying? He tweeted after this Khawaja Asif statement, and I quote from Zalmay Khalilzad, see that tweet on your screens. It is well known that Pakistan received military and financial support for assisting America in our operations in Afghanistan. He says further, and I quote again, it is also well known that the Pakistani establishment was simultaneously providing sanctuary to those fighting against the US forces in Afghanistan. That gives us some perspective, because both Zalmay Khalilzad, the Americans, and the Pakistanis would have thought that the Taliban have got power now, they owe it to us, Americans, for making these Doha Accords, and Pakistanis for helping them all this while to fight the Americans, to whom they were charging $33 billion in rent. But it hasn't worked out for either side. It hasn't worked out for the Americans, it hasn't worked out for the Pakistanis. And Zalmay Khalilzad, who thought that he had struck such a great deal that maybe I should get the Nobel Prize, who knows, he's also regretting this. We come back to Khawaja Asif. Khawaja Asif's lament is much deeper than just about this terrorism. He in fact says, who are our models in Pakistan? Who are our role models in Pakistan? He said, those who invaded our region, our country, they've become our role models. We are naming our missiles and our landmarks after them. Who are these? They are Abdali, Gauri, Ghazni. You can see Pakistani missiles are named after them, and also many landmarks in Pakistan are named after them. The fact is that when they came to invade India, what is now Pakistan was India. And they also got invaded, and they also suffered, populations there also suffered the same depredations that populations elsewhere suffered. Khawaja Asif therefore says, we never found our own national heroes. We hailed invaders as heroes. We have collective amnesia about our own freedom fighters against the British. He also quotes a book by K.K. Aziz. K.K. Aziz was a Pakistani intellectual. Khurshid Kamal Aziz. Khurshid Kamal Aziz in 1985 wrote a book called Murder of History. That book, if you find it, please read it. If you want to understand today's Pakistan, that book is essential reading. And that is a liberal book, liberal publication, a liberal intellectual's writings on Pakistan. And he talks about how Pakistan's textbooks, Pakistan's history teaching have all been contaminated with jihad talk, with religious talk, and with a new kind of nationalism which was never the idea of Pakistan's founders. This book was published by Vanguard Publications, founded by Najam Sethi, yes, journalist Najam Sethi, in 1978, when he was a young man. All of us were young then. And this is a liberal publishing house. Please see the jacket on your screens if you can find it. If you get it, you will learn a lot about Pakistan. The interesting thing is that in 2026, the Defence Minister of Pakistan is quoting from this book and endorsing the ideas of this book. In fact, this business of naming missiles after Gauri, Ghaznavi, Abdali, etc. Our own politician Manpreet Singh Badal, formerly of the Akali Dal, now with the BJP, he has a very interesting take on this. He always says that I tell my Pakistani friends, कह रहे यार आपने अपनी मिसाइलों का तो उनके नाम पे नाम रख दिया जिन्होंने हमारे को इन्वेड किया. People who looted us, people who burnt our homes, people who did terrible things to us. We should name our landmarks, missiles after our own heroes. We are Punjabis, we have our Punjabi history. And the Pakistani friends ask him, which heroes? And he says like Chima, like Randhawa, like Bajwa, like Gil. These are Jat names which are common to both Muslim Punjabis of Pakistan and also Sikhs in India. This is an old liberal argument which Khawaja Asif has brought into his own speech. It's quite a surprise. I don't know how seriously does he take it. He persists, however. At one point, he takes a crack at the Americans also, who are still their allies. His field marshal has been going and dining out with Donald Trump and making a big deal of it. He says these Americans, under their watch in the last 25-30 years, under the presidents over the past 25 years or so, about 10 to 12 crore Muslims have been killed. These Muslims, the latest to be killed also is Gaddafi's son. And then he repeats again with more emphasis. He says even those that were trained by the Western forces that came in. He said Europeans have taken those that they had trained, those they were loyal to them. That is from Afghanistan. The British have taken their own. The Americans haven't taken their own. And those are the ones who are now left behind and who are creating trouble. So basically he's trying to say that TTP and also ISIS coming out of Afghanistan are leftovers of the American jihad in Afghanistan. The first time and second time, the American war on terror, in both of which Pakistan became a partner. He says these two wars in which we became partners with superpowers, these were not our wars. I'm quoting Khawaja Asif. And he said, but for our participation in these wars, we would never face today's tragedy because our religion, हमारा मजहब, it has nothing to do with terror. इस दहशतगर्दी का हमारे मजहब से कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है. This terror has nothing to do with our fate. This is a consequence of us partnering the superpowers in their wars. But at the same time, he also makes an honest disclosure that these wars have brought Pakistan $33 billion. Now, this is where Pakistan is right now. The Americans left Afghanistan 5 years back. So for 5 years, what I had wished in 2011 has happened. So AF has been left to Pak. In AF-Pak region, AF has been left to Pak, and we can see the consequences. I will now tell you what I had said then, and you can figure out, was I right or was I wrong? There was a lot of criticism at that point that how can you tell India to get out of Afghanistan or not to go to Afghanistan and create trouble for Pakistan? My basic point was that Afghanistan as such is of little direct or immediate strategic importance for us. If Pakistan thinks it can control Afghanistan, Pakistanis think they can succeed, wish them luck. That argument was also to challenge what becomes a wholly national consensus in our country, particularly on foreign policy. Everybody agrees over some issues. When everybody agrees over some issues, then it means we are becoming strategically lazy. That is what I was trying to challenge, because it is not healthy for a democracy, and particularly when it has a strategic community that has had even greater continuity than its establishment. It was to challenge this holy consensus that everybody seemed to believe in, that India should play the game in Afghanistan. India should resume the great game of Afghanistan. That I decided to question, or at least intellectually challenge, some other aspects of this lazy consensus, even at the risk of inviting the charge of apostasy. Therefore, I said the time might have come to question the prudence of our unquestioned, undebated idea of engaging in a dirty little Cold War with Pakistan and Afghanistan once the Americans withdraw. Everybody seemed to be accepting the idea that Afghanistan is of great strategic significance to us. I don't know how significant it is for us, but as long as the Pakistanis find it significant for them, they will serve our purpose. The argument was that because Afghanistan is important for India, we can neither cede it to Pakistan nor leave them to fill the power vacuum after the Americans. Similarly, that this is the great game country and we are back to it, somehow inheriting the mantle of the British power in the 19th century, except that we might have to deal with an additional distraction called Pakistan. Further, that Afghanistan is a resource, means mineral-rich land, where we have future commercial stakes, and is a gateway to Central Asia, making transit rights of such paramount importance. There is some truth to these arguments that I said, but not to all. The larger picture looks very different on closer examination. Afghanistan has minerals for sure, but before that, what are we doing with our own minerals? We have hardly exploited our own minerals. That is one sector of our economy which even after 11 years of Modi government and some reformist legislation is still struggling. If you look at your quarterly GDP growth figures, the area that always struggles and that pulls the rest down is mining. So first, deal with your own mining. And yes, there will be a power vacuum in Afghanistan once the Americans leave. It will still be a country of great strategic importance, but for whom is the question? It will be of no immediate use to us. None of our supplies or trade come from Afghanistan. None of our bad guys hide there, that is terrorists. No Afghan has ever been involved. Maybe there was some odd one, but I can say it will be so negligible that I feel safe to say no Afghan. You might have a Pathan who calls himself Afghan, but no Afghan from Afghanistan, no Afghan native has ever been involved in a terror attack on India. In fact, almost never has a terror attack on us has even been planned in the more precise AFPAK region. Those are mostly planned in either Rawalpindi or in Lahore, Muridke or in Bahawalpur. Almost never has an Afghan, Pakhtun, Baloch, Tajik, any ethnicity been involved in a terror attack in India. It's always been the Punjabis from Pakistani Punjab. Ask anybody in the Indian Army who has served in Kashmir, that's most Indian Army officers, and they will tell you that the intruders they fought were exactly the same ethnic stock as the bulk of the Pakistani army they may have to fight in a real war, the Punjabi Mussalman. Yes, as we said earlier, Afghanistan is still a country of great strategic importance. For us, however, it is not a threat. It's a threat for Pakistan. That's why the strategic importance for Pakistan becomes much greater. Pakistan has a long, unsettled border with Afghanistan and a more than latent, irredentist Pathan sentiment on both sides of the Durand line that it dreads spinning out of control. And if Afghanistan breaks up along the north, south, west ethnic lines, Pakistan will have a disaster to the west of it. From tribal ties to funny trade links like gun and drug running, an unsettled Afghanistan will be a permanent thorn in Pakistan's side when 6 divisions of its army are already not able to get the measure of the armed anarchy in FATA, which is now called KPK. Earlier it was federally administered tribal areas, or Balochistan. Why should India then get into this unwinnable mess? More importantly, why should India give the Pakistani and the ISI just what they need, a great, holy, moral justification to pour into Afghanistan to fight the Indian challenge? Leave Afghanistan to the Pakistanis, particularly today. If the Pakistani army thinks it can fix, subdue and control Afghanistan after the British, Soviets and Americans have failed to do precisely this at the peak of each one's superpowerdom, why not let the Pakistanis try their hand at it? If they pour another 10 divisions of the army and half of the ISI into that hapless country now, isn't it that much of a relief for us on our western borders? What could serve our strategic interests better than having Pakistanis discover a permanent strategic threat or challenge along their own western borders? Won't that be some relief? If the Pakistani army thinks it can succeed in a mission in which their mightier predecessors, the British and the Soviet empires and the Americans failed, good luck to them, because it will fulfill the fantasy of strategic depth they have nursed since they were rocked by totally fictional visions of massive Indian tank assaults through the desert, cutting their mainland into two during General Sundarji's Operation Brass Tacks in 1986-87. It is since then that the Pakistani strategic establishment has been seeking strategic depth in Afghanistan. Now, if any army wants to seek the depth of Afghanistan for its armor, vital air force assets, or even nukes, good luck to them. In fact, it would be interesting to see how the rest of the world, particularly the Americans, would react if such a thing were ever contemplated. Far from being a security asset ever, Afghanistan for the Pakistani army will be exactly what it has been for any other invading army in its history. A permanent Waterloo in slow motion. That's precisely what's happening in the AFPAK region right now, and that's precisely what the Pakistanis are dealing with and what Khawaja Asif is now complaining about. So since we talked about Waterloo, I will give you one more famous line from Napoleon. He lost Waterloo, but his most famous battle was the Battle of Austerlitz. Austerlitz is now a place in Czech Republic. That's where Napoleon's armed forces, his armies were fighting allied forces of Russia and Austria. Austria was a big empire then. And there was going to be a tactical move at one point where Napoleon deliberately, as a ploy, weakened his right flank, lowering the allied forces. Allied forces not of the Second World War. This is 1805, 19th century. These were the Russians and the Austrians. When they came in, and it looked like at some point they were fighting so hard that his flank may break, he said, his commanders were getting impatient and they wanted to increase their own forces in that area. Napoleon said, no. And his commanders wanted to divert their own forces to protect the flank instead of assaulting a hill that was a kind of center of Napoleon's challengers, of the opposing armies. That was the rolling hill called Pratzen Heights. Napoleon asked, how long will it take to get on top of this hill? He was told 20 minutes. He said, we can wait for 20 minutes. And he said, when the enemy is making a false move, we must take care not to disturb him. That is exactly the kind of situation we are in vis-a-vis Pakistan and Afghanistan now.